Hi, I'm Rob Parnell and this is Right Now. Today we're doing something different. My good friend Chris Ryall asked if he could interview me for his blog. I agreed without thinking twice. Chris and I have been internet friends for a long time. Years, in fact. He even edited a couple of my books, The Easy Way to Write Horror That Sells and 9 Tales, my short story collection. Plus, I did an edit of his urban thriller, Gold of the Rising Sun, which is due out soon. Anyway, I thought it might be a good idea to film my answers to his questions, as if I don't have enough other work to do. Anyway, here's the result. The Rob Parnell Author Interview.
Please tell us a little about yourself.
Okay, where to start? Quick answer. I'm a writer, musician and film producer. I like to combine my love of technology with teaching people how to be happier and more creative. Basically, I think of myself as an artist, a performer I suppose, and maybe a bit of a teacher.
How did you become a full-time writer?
I've been writing all my life, but decided to go professional in 2002 when I was sacked from my job for writing a novel at work.
What did you do before you became a writer?
Well, during my 20s I tried desperately hard to become a pop star. I was signed to 3 record labels, played in lots of bands and recorded a lot of original songs. But when I got married the first time, I thought I should settle down, so I became a corporate buyer, then a contract manager for the London Underground. Then, when I moved to Australia, I was employed as a contract manager for the Department of Education.
What do you like most about being a writer?
Basically, the freedom to be creative and define what I do with my days. I get to decide what I do with my time, which I think is what everyone should aspire to do.
In your opinion, what is the most difficult thing that writers have to deal with?
Making money! Or should I say, making enough money to live on as a writer. Unless you think in terms of creating writing that will sell, right from day one of going professional, you're going to struggle. It's probably the hardest lesson any professional writer has to learn. You've got to make money so you can pay for the freedom to be creative.
Is writer's block ever an issue for you?
Actually, I used to get blocked a long time ago, but I think that wasn't really writer's block. It was more to do with not knowing what I wanted to do next, or wondering where I was going to find the time, I think once you get into the habit of writing every day, writer's block becomes a kind of nonsense thing that just means you've got your priorities out of whack. To me, writers write, by definition. People who say they're blocked aren't really writers. That's the way I look at it.
What do you consider your greatest achievement so far as a writer?
Still being here, able to do it. Honestly, I thank the universe every day for the privilege of being able to write books, novels, film scripts, whatever. It's a gift that never stops giving.
Among the books you have written, which is your favourite? Why?
I don't know, my favourite is always the one I happen to be working on, at the time. But if I had to choose from my catalogue, non-fiction, probably The Writer and the Hero's Journey, or maybe Horror That Sells. That was the first book I thought was actually as entertaining as it should be. Fiction-wise, I think it would have to be Purge, my crime thriller. I think it's the most honest thing I've ever written.
Are you currently working on a new book? Is it fiction or non-fiction?
I'm working on a few things actually. Purge 2, All the Right Reasons. I'm about 2/3 of the way through that. I'm also working on an updated version of one of my courses, Anatomy of the Modern Bestseller. That's going quite well, but there's a lot of research involved, which is slowing things down a bit. I'm also working on another Udemy course about productivity and creating success. Should take about a month for that one.
With regard to writing fiction, what is your genre?
I used to read a lot of horror, everything I could find actually. Consequently, I only ever wrote horror. These days I'm probably more interested in crime and mystery thrillers. I like the puzzle-solving aspect of them, trying to second-guess the plot, playing with readers' expectations, that kind of thing.
When you write fiction, do your characters share any of your traits?
Oh, definitely. My characters are all me. Well, bits of me anyway. Plus I borrow traits from everybody I've ever known, for other characters. I think you have to. That's what writers do.
When starting a new book, do you jump straight in or do you first plan it out?
To me, jumping straight in is planning. I've found that if I don't plan, I tend to get stuck and have to stop and do it anyway. Sometimes I write maybe a short story without much of a plan, but generally not. I don't want to get halfway through and forget the point I was trying to make.
When do you write? Do you have a set routine?
I used to have set writing times, but these days I just write pretty much all the time. Anytime, anywhere. If it's not actual writing, it's some sort of research or planning or note-taking. Basically, I'm not happy unless I'm being creative.
Do you have a particular place for writing?
I'm really not bothered where I write. Anywhere will do, in my office, on the bed, in the front room, in the garden. Even when I'm out, as long as I've got a computer, I'll just start tapping away at something.
Do you have a favourite author? Who? Why?
Well, I have lots of favourite authors, but these days I tend not to get all gooey over certain authors' work. I get obsessed with authors, read everything they've written, and then kind of move on. If I had to pick one, it would probably be Stephen King. The guy's a walking inspiration to this generation, I think.
Where do you find inspiration?
Inspiration? I don't know, really. Everywhere. My mind is constantly churning, trying to make sense of things, looking for intriguing ideas. I love movies and TV especially characterization-wise. I think what you can do, how you present ideas and fictional people in interesting locations, is all fascinating.
Do you have someone edit your books before publishing them?
Sometimes. It depends on whether I think I've edited it enough myself. My wife, Robin, usually gives everything a once-over, if she's got time. I think I may be a bit too prolific for her, to be honest. It's hard for her to keep up. She's busy herself. Anyway, it's hard to find good editors these days. People you trust. Like you, Chris. You're good. You should do more editing. For me, especially.
Do you design your own book covers? What's the process involved?
Usually I get a graphic artist to design my book covers. I do all my own website designs and posters and flyers and things like that with Photoshop. But I think you need a proper graphic designer for covers. It's nothing mysterious. I use Fiverr.com most times.
What does a writer need to do to market their books once they are published?
Okay, if you've written a great book, you probably don't have to market very much. Advertising is expensive, and even publishers will tell you that all the ads in the world won't shift a mediocre book. I think a bit of social marketing has its place, but it's pretty easy to annoy people if you just keep banging on about the same old title. I don't know, the older I get, the more I think you just have to write better books and get under people's skin, one reader at a time, if necessary.
What are your thoughts on the publishing industry today?
Publishing is just a business, like selling socks or cell phones. There's not much room for anyone but commercially focused professionals these days. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, just that if you want to be taken seriously by traditional publishers, you have to accept it's not about art, even passion, or truth anymore. It's certainly not a place for wannabes or amateurs anymore, which is a shame.
How do you feel about self-publishing versus traditional publishing?
Now, I think self-publishing online is the best thing to happen to writing since the invention of the printing press. Does that answer your question?
Which do you prefer to read, ebooks or real-world books?
Well, I prefer reading real books. It's more relaxing for a start, especially for fiction. I don't mind reading off a screen, but it tends to wear me out. I get bored and distracted in a way that actually doesn't happen when I'm holding a book in my hands. I don't know about you.
Would you prefer your own books to be ebooks or real-world books?
I really don't mind. As long as people like my stuff and keep buying it, I'm happy either way.
Please share the best compliment you've received on your writing.
I like it when people say I'm writing just for them, that somehow I'm speaking to them personally. That feels good.
Have you ever received any negative criticism from a reader?
Oh yes, many times. Kind of goes with the territory though. But, usually criticism tells you more about the reader than it does actually help you improve. You can't please everybody. It's probably a mistake to try.
What is your definition of success for a writer?
My definition of success is having people you don't know looking forward to what you're going to write next. Simple.
What influences have impacted your life as a writer?
Well, lots of things. Being determined not to work 9 to 5 has pretty much defined my life. That's a big influence. Getting involved in creative projects, music, plays, movies, all that is really great. But, of all the influences, mostly meeting Robin. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. It was so great to finally find somebody who understood me.
What passions do you have apart from writing?
Well, I love music, composing songs, film scores, even some longer works. They're actually more like symphonies that I've written that have never been released. Generally I just love technology and using creative software. I like my garden too. And I like pottering around the house, doing nothing much. That's a kind of a passion because I feel so lucky when I'm doing it.
What plans and or dreams do you have for the future?
Oh, too many. I don't think there's enough time to do everything I'd like to do, I'm sure. I'd like to write more serious fiction, produce movies, run a film studio and start a foundation for artists, change the world. All the usual stuff.
What would you consider to be a perfect day?
My perfect day would be doing all the things I mentioned in the last question.
Who is the person you would most like to have a conversation with?
Well, I'm not very sociable at the best of times, so talking to people is probably my least favourite activity. This probably sounds terrible, but I can't think of anyone in particular. No one alive, anyway.
If all books were to be destroyed, but you could choose 5 to be saved, which would they be?
Here we go. My favourite novels of all time. Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. The Complete Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I know that's kind of cheating, but it was either the complete works or maybe The Odyssey by Homer. Otherwise, The Way of All Flesh by Samuel Butler and The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. All fabulous novels.
What advice do you have for new authors?
My advice, keep writing. It's the only thing you need to do to improve, to succeed, to make sense of the world and to produce the results you want.
Is there anything else that you would like to share?
Well, I think I've said quite enough already. Thanks for the interview, Chris. Really appreciate it. And keep writing.